As a long-standing student and researcher in the vast and profound ocean of Buddhist thought, I have often found that the most compelling entry point into this tradition is not a complex philosophical doctrine or a dense sutra, but the life story of the man who started it all. It is a narrative that has resonated across continents and millennia. A story of a prince who renounced a kingdom not for another kingdom, but to conquer the very empire of suffering itself. This is the journey of Siddhartha Gautama, the man who would become the Buddha, the awakened one. To truly comprehend the depth of his teachings, the Dharma, one must first walk alongside him on his path. It is a path that leads from the gilded cage of palatial luxury, through the stark wilderness of extreme asceticism, to the serene shade of the Bodhi tree where the dawn of ultimate truth finally broke. This is not merely a biography, it is a roadmap of the human spirit, a testament to the extraordinary potential that lies dormant within each of us. In this exploration, we shall delve into the historical, psychological, and philosophical dimensions of this monumental journey, treating it not as a myth to be passively received, but as a living blueprint for enlightenment. The Path to Enlightenment, Buddha's Journey. Part 1. The Gilded Cage, the Early Life of Prince Siddhartha. The story begins in the 5th century BCE, in the tranquil gardens of Lumbini, near the foothills of the Himalayas. Here, to Queen Maya and King Suddhodana, rulers of the Shakya clan, a son was born. His birth was no ordinary event, it was said to be accompanied by auspicious signs. And the infant prince, named Siddhartha Gautama, was destined for one of two paths. A revered sage, Asita, wept upon seeing the child, not from sorrow, but with the poignant knowledge that he would not live long enough to witness this prince become either a universal monarch, a Chakravartin, who would rule the world with justice, or a fully enlightened Buddha who would renounce the world to show all beings the path to liberation. King Suddhodana, a man of worldly power, was determined to ensure his son followed the first path. He could not fathom a greater destiny than that of a mighty king. Thus began one of history's most profound and ultimately futile experiments in sheltering a soul from reality. The king built 3 magnificent palaces for Siddhartha, one for each season, and surrounded him with every imaginable luxury. The finest silks, the most talented musicians, delectable foods, and beautiful attendants were his constant companions. Crucially, the king issued a decree: no sign of human suffering was ever to enter the prince's sight. The old, the sick, and the dead were kept far from the palace walls. The gardens were meticulously tended to ensure that not even a withered leaf would mar the vision of perpetual youth and vitality presented to the prince. In this flawless, artificial world, Siddhartha grew into a man of remarkable intelligence and physical prowess. He mastered all the arts and sciences befitting a prince, and he married the beautiful and noble princess Yasodhara, with whom he had a son, Rahula. By all external measures, he possessed everything a human being could desire: wealth, status, family, and pleasure. Yet, within the depths of his being, a subtle but persistent disquiet began to stir. This was not the angst of a man who lacked something, but the profound existential unease of a man who had everything and found it ultimately empty. This divine discontent, known in Buddhist thought as samvega, was the first internal tremor that would eventually shatter the foundations of his gilded cage. He began to question the fleeting nature of the pleasures he experienced, sensing a deeper, more fundamental truth about existence that was being concealed from him. The king, sensing his son's contemplative nature, tightened his grip, increasing the distractions and luxuries. But destiny, or perhaps the prince's own ripening karma, could not be so easily thwarted. At the age of 29, Siddhartha expressed a desire to see his people and his city. The king reluctantly agreed but carefully orchestrated the route, clearing it of any unpleasant sights. Despite these precautions, the devas, divine beings, it is said, intervened to ensure the prince's education would begin. On 4 separate chariot rides out of the palace, Siddhartha encountered 4 sights that would irrevocably alter the course of his life and, indeed, the spiritual history of humanity. First, he saw a decrepit old man, his body bent, his skin wrinkled, leaning heavily on a staff. Siddhartha, who had never seen such a thing, was shocked. He asked his charioteer, Channa, what this was, and Channa was forced to explain the reality of old age. a fate that befalls all who are born. The prince's heart grew heavy. On a second trip, he saw a man writhing in pain on the ground, his body covered in sores. This was his first encounter with sickness. Channa explained that disease and pain are a part of life, and no one is immune. The prince was deeply disturbed, realizing that his own strong body was just as vulnerable. On a third excursion, he saw a group of people wailing and carrying a motionless body. It was a corpse on its way to cremation. For the first time, Siddhartha confronted the stark, undeniable reality of death. Channa explained that this was the end for all beings, a finality from which no wealth or power could offer an escape. The carefully constructed world of the prince crumbled. The pleasures of the palace now seemed like a grotesque mockery, a dance of ghosts in a house already on fire. He saw that he, his beloved wife, his newborn son, everyone, was subject to this same fate of aging, sickness, and death. A profound despair settled upon him. But it was not to last. On his fourth and final trip, he saw a figure that offered not a problem, but a possibility. He saw a wandering ascetic, a shramana, with a shaved head, wearing a simple robe, and carrying only a begging bowl. What struck Siddhartha was not the man's poverty, but the look of serene and tranquil composure on his face. In a world now defined by the suffering he had witnessed, this man seemed to have found an inner peace that transcended it all. Channa explained that this was a man who had renounced the world to seek the truth and the path beyond suffering. The 4 sights were not mere encounters, they were 4 profound lessons in the nature of reality. The first 3 represented the universal truth of dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness and suffering of conditioned existence. The 4th sight represented magga, the path, the hope that a way out of this suffering could be found. The seed of renunciation had been planted. The life of a prince had lost all its meaning, the quest of a seeker had begun. Part 2. The Great Renunciation and the Path of Austerity. The weight of his newfound knowledge was immense. The palace, once a haven of delight, now felt like a prison. The laughter of the court dancers sounded hollow, the music discordant. He saw everyone around him as being swept away by the merciless currents of aging, sickness, and death, yet they remained blissfully, tragically unaware. He knew he could no longer live this lie. The night he made his decision is known as the Great Renunciation, Mahabaniskramana, a pivotal moment of profound sacrifice and resolve. His son, Rahula, had just been born. While the kingdom celebrated, Siddhartha saw the birth not as a bond of love, but as another fetter. Rahula can mean fetter or impediment, binding him to the very world of suffering he now sought to overcome. In the dead of night, he went to his wife's chambers for a final, silent farewell. He stood at the threshold, looking at Yasodhara and their infant son sleeping peacefully. A powerful urge to hold his child one last time arose, but he resisted, knowing that if he did, his resolve might break. He turned away, a silent promise in his heart that he would return not as a prince, but as an awakened being who could offer them the true gift of liberation from all suffering. He mounted his horse, Kanthaka, and rode away from the city, leaving behind his kingdom, his family, and his entire identity. At the edge of the forest, he cut off his long hair with his sword, exchanged his royal robes for the simple cloth of a beggar, and began his life as a homeless wanderer in search of truth. Siddhartha understood that he lacked the knowledge to find the path alone. He sought out the most renowned spiritual teachers of his time in the Gangetic Plain, a region teeming with philosophical and religious ferment. His first master was Alara Kalama, who taught a form of meditation that led to a state of profound concentration known as the sphere of nothingness, Akinkanayatana. Siddhartha, with his exceptional discipline, quickly mastered this state, reaching the same level as his teacher. Alara Kalama was so impressed that he invited Siddhartha to lead his community alongside him. But Siddhartha was not satisfied. He recognized that this meditative state, while blissful, was temporary. It suppressed suffering but did not uproot its cause. Once he emerged from the trance, the fundamental problems of existence remained. It was a sublime escape, not a final liberation. He politely declined the offer and continued his search. His next teacher was Uddaka Ramapada, who taught an even more refined state of concentration, the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, Navasanyanasanyatana. This was considered the highest possible meditative attainment at the time. Again, Siddhartha mastered it with ease. And again, he was offered co-leadership. But his penetrating wisdom saw the same flaw. This too was a conditioned state, a product of mental effort, and therefore impermanent. It did not lead to nirvana, the unconditioned, the utter cessation of becoming and suffering. Having exhausted the wisdom of the masters of his day, Siddhartha concluded that the truth must lie beyond any known teaching. He resolved to find it through his own effort. He was joined by 5 other ascetics who were impressed by his fierce determination. Together, near the banks of the Niranjana River, he began a grueling 6-year period of extreme self-mortification. This was a common belief among the Shramanas of the time, that by subjugating the body, by inflicting pain upon it, the spirit could be freed from its fleshly prison. Siddhartha pushed these practices to their absolute limit. He ate less and less, eventually subsisting on a single grain of rice a day. His body wasted away until he was little more than a skeleton draped in skin. He held his breath for dangerously long periods until he felt excruciating pain in his head and body. He slept on beds of thorns and exposed himself to the blistering heat of summer and the biting cold of winter. He endured pain that would have killed a lesser man. Yet, after 6 years of this brutal war against his own body, he found himself no closer to the truth. His mind, far from being clear and luminous, was clouded by weakness. He realized with startling clarity that torturing the body was not the way. A weakened body could not support the sustained mental energy required for deep insight. He had tried the extreme of sensual indulgence in his palace and the extreme of self-mortification in the forest. And both had failed. This realization was a profound breakthrough. He understood that the path to enlightenment must lie in the middle. It was the middle way, Majjhima Patipada, a path of balance that nourished the body enough to allow the mind to become strong and clear. At that moment, a village girl named Sujata, seeing his emaciated form and mistaking him for a tree spirit, offered him a bowl of milk rice. Siddhartha accepted it. This simple act of nourishment was a symbolic turning point. His 5 companions, horrified, saw this as a betrayal. They believed he had given up the quest and abandoned him in disgust. Now, completely alone, but with a newfound clarity and a body regaining its strength, Siddhartha was ready for the final stage of his journey. Part 3. The unwavering resolve, the night of enlightenment. With his body nourished and his mind settled on the principle of the middle way, Siddhartha walked towards the village of Gaya. There, he found a large pipal tree, later to be known as the Bodhi tree, the tree of awakening. He made a grass mat, sat down in the cross-legged lotus position, and made a momentous vow, an unbreakable resolution known as an adhithana. Let my skin and sinews and bones dry up, and my flesh and blood dry in my body, but I will not rise from this seat until I have attained full enlightenment. As he sat in deep meditation, sinking his consciousness deeper and deeper into the fabric of reality, he encountered his final and greatest adversary. This was not an external demon, but the embodiment of all the forces that bind beings to the cycle of suffering, samsara. This was Mara, the tempter, the lord of illusion. Mara represents the totality of our own inner demons, our desires, our fears, our doubts, and, most fundamentally, our ego clinging. The battle with Mara, which unfolded throughout the night, is a rich and symbolic narrative of the ultimate inner struggle. First, Mara tried to break Siddhartha's concentration with desire. He paraded his 3 beautiful daughters, Tana, craving, Arati, aversion, and Raga, lust, before him. But Siddhartha's mind remained unmoved. Like a stone in a calm lake, he saw the desires for what they were, fleeting, insubstantial, and a source of suffering. Seeing that lust had failed, Mara turned to fear. He summoned a terrifying demonic army, wielding flaming weapons, their faces contorted in rage. They hurled mountains and storms at the seated figure. But as they approached Siddhartha, their weapons transformed into lotus blossoms and fell harmlessly at his feet. His mind was protected by the armor of metta, loving kindness, and he felt no fear, only compassion for these beings who were themselves driven by hatred and ignorance. Finally, Mara launched his most insidious attack, doubt. He challenged Siddhartha's right to seek enlightenment. Who are you to claim this seat? Mara demanded. Many holy men have tried and failed. You have no right. There is no one to bear witness to your worthiness. Mara's army roared in agreement. In this critical moment, Siddhartha did not engage in a battle of words. His ego was already silent. Instead, he performed a simple, profound gesture that has become immortalized in Buddhist art as the Bhumisparsa mudra. The earth-touching gesture. He reached out with his right hand and touched the ground. He was not calling upon a god or any external power. He was calling the earth itself to be his witness, to bear witness to the countless lifetimes of virtuous deeds, of cultivating generosity, ethics, patience, and wisdom, paramitas, that had led him to this very spot. The ancient texts say the earth itself roared in response. I am your witness, and trembled. Routing Mara and his entire legion. The tempter was defeated. The internal battle was won. With his mind now perfectly clear, unshakable, and luminous, Siddhartha entered into progressively deeper states of meditation. His consciousness expanded, and he attained the three true knowledges, Tavya, during the 3 watches of the night. In the first watch, from evening to midnight, he gained the power to recollect his own past lives, Pubbanavasanusati Jnana. He saw, with perfect clarity, thousands of his previous existences, as a human, as an animal, in heavenly realms and in hellish ones. He saw the endless, repetitive cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, driven by ignorance and craving. This was not a vague memory, but a direct, experiential understanding of the vastness of samsara. In the second watch, from midnight to 3 a.m., he attained the divine eye, Dibbakaku Jnana. With this, he could see the karmic process of all living beings. He saw how their wholesome and unwholesome actions, karma, led them to be reborn in different states of existence. He saw the intricate, impersonal, and unerring law of cause and effect playing out across the entire cosmos. His compassion deepened immeasurably as he saw how beings, shrouded in ignorance, created their own suffering over and over again. In the third and final watch, as the morning star rose in the pre-dawn sky, he penetrated the ultimate nature of reality. He directed his perfectly concentrated mind to the question of suffering. What is its cause? And what is its cessation? At that moment, the entire chain of dependent origination, Patikasamuppada, was revealed to him. He saw that at the root of all suffering was ignorance, avidya, which leads to craving, tanha, which leads to clinging, upadana, which leads to the whole mass of birth, aging, and death. And he saw that with the complete cessation of ignorance, the entire chain unravels, leading to the end of suffering. He understood, with a certainty that could never be shaken, the 4 noble truths. In that instant, the final veils of ignorance were lifted. The outflows of sensual desire, the desire for existence, and ignorance were extinguished. His mind was utterly liberated. Siddhartha Gautama was no more. He had become the Buddha, the awakened one. He had reached nirvana. Part 4. The Dharma, the fruits of enlightenment. For 7 weeks following his enlightenment, the Buddha remained in the vicinity of the Bodhi tree, experiencing the bliss of liberation and exploring the profound depths of the truth he had discovered. This truth, the Dharma, was subtle, deep, and difficult to perceive. A hesitation arose in his mind. This Dharma that I have discovered is profound. Hard to see, hard to understand. It goes against the stream of the world. If I were to teach it, others would not understand me, and that would be wearying and troublesome for me. The world, he mused, was blinded by the dust of greed, hatred, and delusion. How could they possibly comprehend such a subtle reality? At this moment of cosmic significance, the deity Brahma Sahampati appeared before him. Fearing the world would be lost if the Buddha remained silent, Brahma implored him to teach, arguing that there were beings, with little dust in their eyes, who would understand the Dharma and attain liberation. The Buddha, out of his immense compassion for all beings, surveyed the world with his enlightened vision. He saw that people were indeed like lotuses in a pond. Some were still stuck deep in the mud. Some were rising towards the surface, and some were already at the surface, ready to bloom in the sunlight. For the sake of these latter ones, he agreed to teach. He resolved to turn the wheel of the Dharma, Dhammacakkappavattana. His first thought was to teach his former masters, Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramapada, but he perceived with his divine eye that they had already passed away. He then thought of the 5 ascetics who had abandoned him. Knowing they were intelligent and sincere, he journeyed on foot to the deer park at Sarnath, near Varanasi. When his former companions saw him approaching, they arrogantly agreed amongst themselves to ignore him, seeing him as a quitter who had reverted to a life of luxury. But as the Buddha drew nearer, his radiant serenity and majestic composure were so overwhelming that they involuntarily rose to greet him. There, in the deer park, the Buddha delivered his first sermon, a discourse that set in motion the entire course of Buddhism. This was the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the discourse on setting the wheel of Dharma in motion. In this seminal teaching, he laid out the foundational principles of his discovery, the very heart of the path to enlightenment. He began by counseling them to avoid the two extremes he himself had tried and rejected, the extreme of sensual indulgence, which is base and fruitless, and the extreme of self-mortification, which is painful and fruitless. Instead, he offered them the middle way, the path of wisdom, peace, and liberation. This path was the Noble Eightfold Path, and its theoretical framework was the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths, Katari Aryasakani. These are not pessimistic dogmas, but a pragmatic, medical-like diagnosis of the human condition and its cure. The truth of suffering, dukkha. The Buddha stated that life as we ordinarily know it is fundamentally unsatisfactory. This is dukkha. It includes the obvious physical and mental pain of birth, old age, sickness, and death, the suffering of encountering what we dislike and being separated from what we like, and the suffering of not getting what we want. But on a more subtle level, it includes a pervasive existential anxiety arising from the fact that all things, even moments of happiness, are impermanent and conditioned, viparinama dukkha and sankhara dukkha. It is the background hum of unsatisfactoriness that pervades a life lived in ignorance of reality. The truth of the origin of suffering, samudaya. Suffering does not arise without a cause. The Buddha identified its root cause as tanha, which translates as thirst or craving. This is the relentless wanting and grasping that drives us. He identified three types of craving: the craving for sensual pleasures, the craving for existence and becoming, the drive for fame, success, and continued life, and the craving for non-existence, the nihilistic desire for self-annihilation. This craving itself is rooted in a fundamental ignorance, avijja, of the true nature of reality. The truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha. This is the good news. Since suffering has a cause, if we eliminate the cause, the suffering will cease. The complete cessation of suffering is possible. This state of cessation is nirvana, nibbana, the extinguishing of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. It is not a heaven or a place, but an unconditioned state of perfect peace, wisdom, and liberation, attainable in this very life. The truth of the path to the cessation of suffering, magga. The Buddha did not just identify the problem and the cure, he laid out a clear, practical, and systematic path to achieve it. This is the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path, Aryo Atthangiko Maggo. This is the practical prescription for ending dukkha. The 8 factors are not sequential steps but interconnected aspects of a single way, to be cultivated simultaneously. They are grouped into 3 divisions of spiritual training: wisdom, panya, right understanding, samadhi, understanding the 4 noble truths and the nature of reality as impermanent, anicca, unsatisfactory, dukkha, and devoid of a permanent self, anatta. Right intention, samma sankappa, cultivating intentions of renunciation, letting go of craving, of loving kindness, goodwill towards all, and of harmlessness, compassion for all beings. Ethical conduct, sila. 3. Right speech, samavaka, abstaining from lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. 4. Right action, sammakamanta, abstaining from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. 5. Right livelihood, samma-ajiva, engaging in a profession that does not harm oneself or others. Mental discipline, samadhi. 6. Right effort, samma-vayama, the energetic will to prevent unwholesome states from arising, to overcome those that have arisen, to cultivate wholesome states, and to maintain them. 7. Right mindfulness, samma-sati, developing bare, moment-to-moment awareness of the body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. This is the heart of meditation. 8. Right concentration, samma-samadhi, cultivating deep states of meditative absorption, jhana. that lead to a calm, focused, and unified mind, capable of penetrating insight. Upon hearing this discourse, one of the 5 ascetics, Kondanya, gained the Dharma eye, the first glimpse of nirvana, and became the first disciple to awaken. The others soon followed. The wheel of Dharma had been successfully set in motion. The Buddha had not just found liberation for himself, he had opened the path for all. Part 5. The Legacy of the Awakened One. For the next 45 years, the Buddha walked the dusty roads of the Gangetic Plain, a tireless and compassionate teacher. He taught a message that was radical for its time. The path to liberation was not dependent on caste, birthright, or the whims of a creator god. It was dependent entirely on one's own effort and understanding. He taught kings and courtesans, Brahmins and outcasts, merchants and farmers. He established the Sangha, the community of monks and nuns, to preserve the Dharma and provide a supportive environment for those who wished to dedicate their lives to the practice. His teaching method was practical and tailored to his audience, using similes and parables to convey profound truths. He established a code of conduct for his monastic disciples, the Vinaya, and delivered thousands of discourses, the suttas, that would be memorized and passed down through generations. At the age of 80, in the town of Kushinagar, the Buddha's long ministry came to an end. Lying on his side between 2 sal trees, he gave his final instructions to his grieving disciples. He urged them not to mourn his physical passing but to take his teachings, the Dharma, as their guide. Be a lamp unto yourselves. Be a refuge unto yourselves. Take refuge in nothing outside yourselves, he counseled. His very last words were a powerful summary of his entire teaching and a final call to action. Vayadhamma Sankara. Apamadina Sampaditha. All conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. With these words, he passed into parinirvana, the final, complete extinction of all conditioning, leaving behind not a divine edict, but a timeless path. Conclusion. The journey of Siddhartha Gautama is arguably the most complete heroic journey in human history. It is a story that begins with a prince who possessed every worldly pleasure and ends with a sage who had transcended the world itself. He confronted the most fundamental questions of human existence head-on, not with abstract speculation, but with unwavering resolve and penetrating insight. His life stands as a monumental testament to human potential. He was not a god, nor a prophet sent by one. He was a human being who, through his own relentless effort, purified his mind, awakened his wisdom, and discovered the ultimate truth. His path from the palace to the Bodhi tree is a universal metaphor for the spiritual quest itself. It involves the initial recognition of suffering, dukkha, the renunciation of the superficial attachments that cause it, the disciplined search for truth, the internal battle with our own, Mara, and the final dawning of wisdom. The Buddha's life demonstrates that enlightenment is not a mystical gift bestowed upon a chosen few, but the natural state of a mind that has been completely cleansed of ignorance, greed, and hatred. In our modern world, fraught with anxiety, distraction, and existential uncertainty, the Buddha's journey and the Dharma he revealed are more relevant than ever. His teachings offer a profound and sophisticated psychology, a rigorous ethical system, and a practical methodology for training the mind. The path he laid bare, the middle way of ethical conduct, mental discipline, and transformative wisdom, is a direct challenge to the extremes of materialism and nihilism. It shows us that it is possible to live in this world with peace, compassion, and clarity. The story of the Buddha is not simply a historical account to be admired, it is an invitation. It is an invitation to look within, to question our assumptions, to confront our own suffering, and to undertake the inner journey with the same courage and diligence that he did. The path to enlightenment that Siddhartha walked is not a relic of the past, it is a living possibility, open to any human being who is ready to strive on with diligence and become a lamp unto themselves.